contact information. As we join, folks, please sign in so we can have a compiled list of everyone who's participating at each meeting. Name and email address, please, and if you're representing an organization, appreciate knowing that.
Where do we sign in, Russ?
To the chat box, John.
Chat box? Okay.
Down at the bottom where it says chat.
Yeah.
Click on that, and that's allow you to enter your information.
If we've already signed in the past meeting, it won't be necessary to sign in tonight, will it?
Well, if you at least put in your name so that we can kind of get an attendance for this. If we already have your information, that's great. But we do want to make sure we have all the information to get information back to everyone through emails.
You see where the chat box is?
Sit down there on the left hand.
So if you're joining us for the first time, we'd really like to get all of your contact information and which organization you're representing, if you're representing an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Seth. I haven't seen you in a while.
Hey, Russ, how are you?
Well, good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. If you just joined us, please sign in. If you have participated in a past meeting and provided your contact information, your name is adequate for tonight. If it's the first time you've joined us, please provide us with the name and organization if you represent one, and specifically your email so we can get information back to you. We will wait just a couple more minutes before we actually start. See, Judy is not on yet, and she's kind of our leader of this whole effort, so I want to make sure that she can join us. If not, we are recording this so that we will have it for the record. And the PowerPoint I'm going to share tonight has already been made into a PDF, and Judy has that if you would like to get a copy of it. More than happy to share that information.
Hey, Russ, there was some
Yes,
mention this week that that the National Park Service is working with the Kentucky Wildlands through Hal Rogers. I just heard that. Are you involved in that, or is the RTCA, or is that something else? Or
at this point, I'm not involved with it. I'm aware of it, but not directly involved.
Okay.
I see Judy has joined us. That's great.
Yep, I had a little internet problem, but I think I got it fixed now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm going to share my screen and we'll start the process off here. Again, like we said in the past, please sign in. Even if you've signed in before, you can just give us your name. If you are first time joining us, we'd like both your name and your email address. And even if you're representing an organization, what that is, so that we have an idea who's participating in this process. Get my computer to catch up with us here.
And Russ, if you're about to get the program started, I'll go ahead and start recording. Is that good?
Okay, I appreciate that, yes.
Sure. Okay.
All right, now I gotta get to the other monitor. Technology. Here we go. Okay, well, I thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm sure there'll be a few more folks that will come online after we get started here, but as always, please sign into the chat box with the name, organization, and email address if you're first time joining us. Name otherwise, so we can kind of keep track of who's participating in the meetings. Tonight, I want to kind of go over a few maps that have been collected on Kentucky's frontier trails, share that information. I also want to go through all the task groups and the list of participants that have signed up. I'm really happy with the amount of participants that have agreed to help with this process. It shows a wide variety of interest, and we'll go through each of those groups. And as we go through those groups, I'm going to ask that we all kind of share some thoughts in the chat box as to maybe some goals or thoughts or considerations that group should consider as they start to formulate their mission of completing that particular task. And so I want to do a little brainstorming tonight to just capture some information in the chat as what your ideas are. That might be contact, it might be an idea, it might be a process, whatever you might have to share to help that group move forward. And we'll cover that in a little more detail. And then I want to basically allow for a little bit of Zoom Square discussion at the end so we can share. And right now, make sure that everybody's aware that the next meeting will be March 11th at 6:30 Eastern Time. So to start out with, some mapping that Judy has shared with me and others have provided. This particular corridor involves 17 counties here in Kentucky, from Cumberland Gap up to the Ohio River, actually going to the Portsmouth, Ohio. And that is a lot of territory for the corridor to encompass. And it's going to involve a lot of good communications, a lot of outreach, and it's going to take some time to do this effort. Historically, there have been some records of the Warriors Path route through Kentucky, and this is Kentucky's 18th century Warriors Path diagram, basically showing records from 1776, 1784, and 2009 that have been prepared. This is a record. It's not necessarily going to be exactly where this is showing. And obviously we don't have city names or county lines or road names to superimpose on top of this at this point. But it is a general indication of the corridors for Warriors Path, and it's a starting point. Dr. Fox shared this with us early on in one of our early meetings in his presentation with Boone Trace. And this kind of shows several of the historic trails here in Kentucky, starting down at Cumberland Gap, and then that flat lick splitting in different directions. We have Warriors Path in primarily purple going off to the right, and then Boone Trace and the Wilderness Road Trail going more to the left, and Boone Trace ultimately going up through the center to Boonesboro, and the Wilderness Road route headed towards Louisville. So this is a great piece of information to work with, and just as an enlargement of one of that, looking closer down at Cumberland Gap and Flat Lick and how the trails split apart and then overlapped a little bit. But this is all part of the history of our state, and it is an important part of this planning process to tie it all together. So that's a little background on some mapping that we have at this time. There will be more maps created, more maps found through this process as we get into it in more detail. And we'll share those as we gather that information. Next, I'd really like to talk about the task teams. And Helen, I'd like to start with the organizational framework team. And at this point, we've got some great volunteers stepped up to help with these components of the organizational framework, breaking it down into an aspect of eventually incorporating Zoom meeting host, and that's very important. I really appreciate folks stepping up for that. Outreach liaison to elected officials. There's always going to be a constant communication required to the elected officials on this project. And so we're going to put together basically a strategy for that and how that's done. Facebook page, thanks to Max Hammonds for putting that together, and I'll share that at the end of the presentation tonight, that we now have a Facebook page for the Warriors Path Project to share information from. And then folks have volunteered to step forth with some meeting space. And so again, thank you for everyone that stepped forward to help with the organizational framework. And I now would really like to maybe have folks take a couple minutes to just use the chat box to maybe jot down some ideas, some thoughts, contacts, or any information that you think might be helpful for the organizational framework task team to utilize of information that you have and you can share. So please enter it in the chat box, and we will capture this and share it back with the committees here in the next few days. And it's my hope that each of the committees will have an opportunity to gather in their own separate Zoom meetings in the next few weeks, and then report back at our next meeting on the 11th of March. So again, any ideas or thoughts or goals that you might have for the organizational framework that you'd like to share, please enter it in the chat box. And Helen, I'm going to kind of rely on you, if you would, to watch that. I can't see the chat box. Let me know if it kind of slows down. We'll move on to the next task group.
Sure. So far, we've got Frida Lancaster suggesting the Estill County Fiscal Court.
Okay. Does anyone have experience with incorporating, creating a nonprofit? I'm sure that, having gone through that, it might be helpful to share some ideas. Any thoughts you have on the outreach process? And the organizational aspects of this type of project is not something that has to be done right out of the chute. Currently our contact list is over 106 individuals. And so we are an alliance of project partners here. And we may start out by just continuing as an alliance with maybe a few key people formulating some of the decisions, networking that information and recommendations outward. But ultimately, it's hopeful that this will be a project that can have an organization behind it as a nonprofit, be able to take advantage of funding opportunities that nonprofits have, and offer the capability of perhaps being a little more sustainable as a vision and project combined.
Russ, we don't have anything more in the chat. Oh no, we've got David Dummer suggesting, can we develop a map that overlays the historical map you showed earlier with a current map?
Yeah.
Maybe the 7.5 quad map of the area, something where everyone can tell exactly where these historical routes are.
Yeah, happy to share what we've got. I don't have personally the GIS capability to do that, but I suspect that some of the members in our program here, the project partners, will have that capability. And I'm sure it's just a matter of timing that we can get to that. But that is an excellent suggestion. It would all help us orientate a little better. And also remember that some folks have already been down this road a little bit. John Grace has put some mapping up on the internet of, using some protocols that he established to try and identify the route. So all those pieces of information are going to need to be compiled and overlaid and ultimately evaluated as to what is the best route that we can put together at this point with the knowledge we have.
Russ, I think that David's comment is actually a great lead into the next topic, which I will post now. And while I have the floor, I'll take this opportunity to remind people to please mute. If you're not actually speaking, it helps just cut down on the background noise.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, please mute. Again, if you're coming in just now, sign into the chat box with your name if you we want to record who's participating.
And now I'm moving on to the topic, the second task group topic of corridor master planning. That heading is up in the chat box now.
Okay, great. So please enter your thoughts and ideas that you'd like to share related to this group's efforts. It's broken down into several specific segments. We've got motorized routes, bicycle routes, hiking routes, equestrian routes where possible, locating the original trail and mapping. That's a real important point we just talked about. And then general planning aspects, trying to coordinate all these components is another aspect of this. The GIS mapping technology and capability is very important, and I'm really proud of the aspect that the area development districts are willing to participate with this effort. And then demographics are an important component too, to understand through this entire corridor, because that'll all be important relative to future grants that we'll be seeking to help implement some of these ideas that are generated. So again, any thoughts, recommendations, contacts, etc., that you think this group could use to help move forward, I'd appreciate you putting that in the chat box at this time. And again, thank you for all the folks that are willing to step up and take on some of these roles.
Tressa Brown asks in the chat, are there other historic sites along this route to draw additional support?
Yes, there are. And we've got historical aspects throughout the corridor that are related to the communities, the cities, the early settlers. All of those opportunities need to be assessed, documented, located, and assessed as to how they can tie in to this educational corridor. And we want to be able to identify as many of those historical assets along the corridor as we can. So local historical groups will be an important part of this process. And I appreciate your willing to put forth some thoughts. My thinking was that we just put a list of things and ideas out there. The committees or task groups with themselves will kind of prioritize and develop their own as they go forward. But this just gives a little more information to work from. Want to have this entire process be as inclusive as possible.
John Fox offers a comment in the chat, suggest connectivity with Licking Valley Adventures at the north and Kentucky Wildlands at the south, and most of all, Boone Trace.
Right, okay.
And
Thank you,
then
John.
Jeremy Wells, perhaps a list of existing historical markers along the route and nearby might be a good place to start. that data is probably already recorded somewhere and could be overlapped in the same manner as putting a modern map under the historical one, as David mentioned.
It's a very good idea, very good. I suspect that some of those historical markers are identified, maybe some transportation department mapping. If they're in the right of way, they had to have a permit to put it there. So that might be a potential source for information. And one of the
And if you-
primary, go ahead.
I was going to say that those folks seem to be good at anticipating the next topic area. The third
Okay.
task group is culture and history. So
Okay.
I'll paste that in as a header.
All right, we'll put that in. Culture and history. Our next task team, telling an indigenous story. That's a very important and basic aspect of this corridor, and understanding where the trade path is to the best of our ability, and understanding how that was opening up this part of the country. And then the animal migration paths that followed the waterways. These corridors were primarily or originally buffalo trails. And so understanding those aspects to this is an important component of trying to locate the actual Warriors Path corridor detail. And then there's obviously the continuing historical research that's necessary here. And historical societies, folks that have knowledge of their communities from a historical point will need to be part of this process. So any thoughts that you have that this group should consider relative to the components related to culture and history? Ideas, potential contacts, nodes of history that you're aware of that you could jot down, that we just don't want to lose track of the opportunities there to really explore all the aspects of culture and history along this corridor. And I would normally do this in an in-person meeting and you'd be watching me misspell every word. So I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to type out the information for me, and we can capture it much quicker in this process.
Hey, Russ,
Yes, go ahead.
that's John Fox. I forgot to mention when I spoke at the last meeting, this is the only thing I'll say today, I hope, but don't dominate the meeting. But when they go out and start looking for the pieces of the actual trail, what I would suggest is they establish some kind of driving route that's fairly pleasant, fairly easy, and is as accurate as they can be. But I think what they'll do, and what we found, is we found little segments of it. And they don't expect there to be a connectivity where you're going to be able to hike the whole trail probably from one end to the other. And so what you'll end up with is a bunch of pieces of it that's really interesting. And you may find extended segments where there could be an entry point and an exit point. And all I'm saying is just kind of keep it in mind that there's probably not going to be a single continuous trail the whole way, but to feature those in some manner. And then you're going to get into problems with the Native Americans, wanting you to stay away from certain areas. So
That's right. Yeah. If there are sacred areas to be protected, we need to stay away from. We'll need to determine that as well. But thank you, John, because that's very true. The one continuous path that we'll have out of this early on will be the motorized route. It'll be as close as it can be based on following current roadways to the corridor of the Warriors Path. And over time, segments of hiking, segments of equestrian, etc., will be closer to the sections of the actual pathway. And where there's an opportunity to be as correct as possible and it is publicly accessible, we will identify that. We are not going to promote folks hiking on private land without permission. So That's part of this process. We have to know right up front that we will not be 100% accurate on the actual location throughout the entire corridor, but we want to connect the dots throughout the corridor that are essential for the education and understanding of the importance of the Warriors Path here in Kentucky.
Well, what we did with the Boone Trace is we've got 5 different ways to experience it. To drive it, ride a bicycle. This could be a good opportunity for bicycling, mountain bike or otherwise. Hiking, you can hike through. And then there could be opportunity for paddling as well as equestrian. So
Okay,
that's
great.
what we ended up with.
Great.
What it's worth.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, Boone's Trace is a great model to follow for this particular effort. And if you haven't looked at the master plan, it's available. I know John posted in the past, but we can provide you with the link if you would like to see it. Please let us know and we'll send a link to you.
You can just Google Boone Trace Master Plan. We dedicated
okay.
the whole domain just to that. Just
Okay.
look for 2018. And it should just pop right up.
All
And
right, great.
we got the maps. The mapping, the Bluegrass ad did all the mapping on that. If they're available for you all.
Thank you, John. Hey, we still have any comments coming in, Helen?
Yes, actually, there have been some good ones. Jessica Blankenship said we may be able to get some of the historic markers info from the Kentucky Historical Society. There was also a question about other resources like the Kentucky Heritage Council, UK Archaeology. Joe Crawford said, would it help for each county to have a more formalized local team that focuses on their assets in the relation to the overall route, then work with contiguous counties when working on the driving and hiking routes to link up? Seems like this would make it less daunting. Tressa Brown adds, this corridor includes a major enslaved escape route. Jeremy responds, I know there's a historical marker right across the river in Portsmouth, Ohio about the Underground Railroad. So that'd be a nice tie-in.
Right.
I believe someone said that is an ending point, correct?
Correct, yes.
So there's just a whole nice dialogue going on here. It certainly was a point on the escape route, but not necessarily an end point. Since folks were tracked and brought back whenever possible, the route actually goes all the way to Canada. And
Excellent.
Jeff Stevens adds, I hope the Indigenous Story team can speak with current tribal members, as these are not just historical figures, but currently living people. I think their input would be great, and meeting at the task team level may be easier to schedule rather than just the full meeting.
Excellent suggestions.
Tressa's with the Kentucky Heritage Council and is offering to contact the Kentucky Historical Society. Yay. Another aspect, the early iron ore history with the huge stone furnaces is located throughout this area that would be of historical interest.
Okay.
So that's quite a few topics under culture and history.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Sure, I'll post the next prompt for marketing and branding.
All right, please. So with this, we've broken it down into several sections as well. The basic promotion and marketing of the path itself. Ultimately, we'll have to do a partners outreach strategy, what kind of media outreach programs we may want to implement so that we're consistent in our message. A logo is ultimately going to need to be developed for this project. And then there's the branding and brochure development aspects to this. So these are several pieces of marketing and branding. And so I'd really like to have any ideas or thoughts that folks might have, or experiences or contacts that you might have that might help with this process. Please enter that into the chat for us. This isn't necessarily something new, but it is something unique to this project. And that is something that is going to be a long-term icon developed for this project with a logo and the branding process.
avoid stereotyped imagery. I know I'm talking to professionals.
Again, I want to thank folks that have stepped up to help with these various task groups. Many hands make light work. This is a very large project and it's going to take a lot of effort. So I really appreciate folks stepping forth to provide a helping hand in the areas of their interest.
Jess Stevens says a logo is part of overall branding, and she's happy to help with both.
Excellent.
And Jeremy Wells says he can help with publicity through the newspaper when the time is right.
Right. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's great. So just let me know when that slows down a little bit and we'll move on to the next one, Helen.
Well, we've already got Jess's name down for the brochure, so that's good.
Yes.
Any other comments on marketing and branding before we move on to the 5th task group? Going once, going twice.
All right.
All right. So the
National
fifth ta-
State and National Scenic Byway.
Yeah, that prompt is up now.
Yep. Any thoughts or suggestions, or anyone have any experience working with these organizations that they'd like to share? I know that it's usually one before the other is what I've understood at state level before national level. But the original thought process was to get to a national byway certification through Kentucky so we can connect the same level of national byway certification that occurs in Tennessee, so we can get all the way through both states here. And this is a defined process. I've not done it personally, but I know it's a defined process, and you just have to make sure you go through all the efforts. And there may be some organizational verifications that have to be done, et cetera, but we just have to first determine what the requirements are to be certified, and then put together a strategy to go forward to seek those certifications.
Joy Brown would like to put out a challenge for more people to join one or more of the task teams. With 27 folks on the call in so many different areas of expertise that we need to take advantage of.
That's right.
And I think I just started talking over someone else. I don't know who
Go
that
ahead,
was.
John.
That was me. We just, there's a road right across the river from Boonesboro called Athens, but they call it Athens Boonesboro Road. That's now the Daniel Boone Heritage Trail. And that was just authorized by the state level. Now the
Okay.
Transportation Cabinet's a scenic byway. And there was a fellow named Harry Enoch that did the application. It's a fairly rigorous application where you have to give the history, and so that shouldn't be any problem for us. But there was an application process that he had to go through and had to get approved, and then they put the two little signs out, it says Scenic Byway starts here. And it's officially called the Daniel Boone Heritage Trail. It's where they crossed the river and went up Athens into the little town of Athens, and then on to Lexington. But we just went through that process. I didn't participate, but I didn't do it. But that was the process that was involved. And the girl that's kind of in charge of that, first name is Judy. Can somebody come up with? I can't think of it right off she's in the Department of Local Programs and she's the one to do the Scenic Byway thing. I'll come up with a name and email it to Judy, maybe Judy Schmidt.
John, could these folks contact you to get some more details
Yeah, sure.
directly? Okay,
Yeah.
great. I appreciate that. Great. And again, if you have a interest in helping out with this, please let us know. Sign up for it. It would help move this forward. Any other comments come in?
Yes, Joe Crawford says a big part of Byways is documenting all the historic and cultural sites along the route. So it will have to come once we get some of the asset identification completed.
Okay, great.
And to reiterate, I guess both Joy and John's point, that right here in the chat box is a place people can express interest in different task teams. We can just take it from here and add you to the lists that we've already created. You know, you can see names on the presentation of folks who signed up last time.
Great. Thank you very much.
And Tressa Brown says if the sites have been surveyed, they will already be in the KHC database.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I think we'll move on to the next task group.
That's everything I've got. Oh,
That
yeah.
is the last task group. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, we didn't put the task group up that's doing the application for RTCA assistance. And Judy and Max are working very hard on that. I'll let everybody know that I have reviewed a draft, and I'll be providing comments next week on the draft. And they are seeking the letters that go with the application, the letters of commitment. And once that is all packaged along with maybe a couple maps, then they'll be submitting that application to me by March 1st. And then I will package it together and upload it into the regional system for review. And this process will take probably about 2 months before we know which projects have been approved for next year. And we will get back with you as soon as we have the results of that decision. So next on the computer here, I've got a big thank you to Max Hammond for putting together the Facebook page. This is the link to it. This is a great start to share information, to be able to help promote what this project is all about. And we want to take advantage of this and many other forms of technical connections to the internet to help tell the story and get folks involved. So hats off to you, Max, for taking the effort to put this together. And do you have anything you'd like to share or add about the Facebook? Max, I'd like to hear from you.
Yes, sir, Russ, I would. So far, we've got a public facing Facebook page. Later this week, I'll go ahead and start some group pages so we could share administrative information between us. The primary purpose of this Facebook page is to get the public engaged in our project. And it's working well so far. I think we have more than 400 followers now. Our reach is over 2,500 people at this point. So there's a lot of enthusiasm. If people have particular pictures of sites along the trail that they would like to share with me, I could use that to add content to the Facebook page as we go. I want to keep it interesting and informational for everyone.
That's fantastic, Max. Anybody have any questions for Max regarding the Facebook page? Well, if not, again, thank you. I really appreciate the willingness to step forward and put this together. That's an important part of this process, is keeping the public informed. And this provides one of the best ways to do that. So with this, I want to basically conclude the PowerPoint portion of tonight's meeting. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can open up for some discussion or questions you folks may have and information you'd like to share. And again, just remember that our next meeting is scheduled for March 11th. And to start out with, I'd like to ask Judy if she has anything that she'd like to share with the group before we get into open discussion.
Thank you, Russ. So Max and I have been working on this application and had quite a bit of discussion. And we decided that my knowledge of the trail is more on the southern end and Max is on the northern end. So we're kind of splitting up duties. So if you're from Estill County down to the Cumberland Gap and you're trying to help locate the path in your community or have questions, contact me. But Max is more familiar with the northern part. So from Clark County on up to the Ohio River, Max will be the contact on that. Also, we're trying to, last time there was a YouTube video of the meeting, we're trying to get that posted on Facebook. So in case you missed the meeting, or in case people come across the Facebook page and just want to know what's going on, they can link in and listen to the meetings that they missed. Also had a great conversation with the Forest Service this week, and I think we're all in line with the project, and hopefully there'll be a major part of it. They don't know if they can commit at this time till they go through all their process, but they're definitely interested in linking their existing trails into the system that parallel the path, and hopefully providing us space information with what they have on their records. Also, the map that was shown, the first map that was created in 2009 by a group from the University of Kentucky that got a research grant from the DOT. And it looks like there's a research paper online. So if you have a university library card, you can get that research and find out the research that went in behind mapping it. And I knew they use geological as well as cartography information and old maps based on the time to try to put that map out. So that's why we're thinking that's a good starting point if you don't know where the path goes in your community. That one seems to have some historical data behind it. So, but boots on the ground, the suggestion that was made earlier by Joe about having local committees, that's essential, that if each county will put together a local committee and tell us where are your historical items along the trail, and then work with the counties on each side of you to determine all the paths we were talking about, the automotive, the bicycle, the original Warriors Path. So that is going to be critical. And Joe, I hope you'll take the lead in Estill County, and I'll take the lead in Jackson County, and I hope everybody else out there will tell us which county you'll take the lead in.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Judy. At this point, does anyone else have something they'd like to share with the group as a whole?
Russell, I would like to say that I've started the incorporation, and we've already got 2 existing nonprofit organizations that are willing to sponsor us in that. So we'll proceed with that. And the purpose, of course, is that'll put us in a position to seek funding when the timing is right. We won't have to wait on forming that 501c3. But one thing I would like some help with from everyone is drafting an appropriate mission statement for our alliance to incorporate into the incorporation.
Yeah, that is very, very true. You will need to have that vision and mission figured out to move very far down the road from where we are now, so we stay on the right path. And that may need to be a component of one of the committees to take that on, to start putting some thoughts down and sharing it with the group, so that we can solidify something as far as both the vision and the mission for this effort here. So thanks, Mac. I really appreciate that input,
Yes,
and I know that'll be important for moving forward with the 501c3. Any other thoughts?
Jessica Blankenship had a question about having the Zoom meetings earlier in the day. I don't know if that might be something some working groups would want to do.
Well, what are your thoughts on that, folks? When Judy and I first talked about this, we thought that maybe this evening would be better, but it isn't always better for all families. So I'm willing to be flexible And maybe we could do it at different times in different months. That if that helps, I'm open to that process. So let us know in the chat box what you think of the timing should be for our meetings. Give us something to work from. Prefer to have a meeting in the afternoon versus the evening? Let us know.
Looks like Natalie and Tressa are both weighing in. Oh, and Eunice that way.
Okay. Any other thoughts that folks have that they'd like to share with the group?
Another vote for earlier meetings.
Okay. Well, we can give it a try if the next round, if you'd like, and do an afternoon meeting on the 11th. I'm going to probably, Judy and I will be reaching out to a couple of the volunteers that are willing to host a Zoom meeting to set that up so we can get the information out for the next meeting in a timely manner. I hope that the process we're using right now, that email invitation, is working for everyone. I know that not everyone out of a list of 106 can make every meeting, but this is a great showing, and we've got a lot of folks involved in the effort now, taking on some roles to help move the ideas forward and try and accomplish some tasks here. Again, it's my hope that after this meeting, we will compile the information in the chat box by task group, share it with the folks that have signed up for that task group, and encourage them to do a separate meeting before March 11th to kind of formulate some thoughts and then share that information back with us at the next meeting. And if folks have ideas or information that they'd like to share about the history, sites, anything along the line of what the purpose of this project is, we want that information to be shared to the group as a whole. Any questions?
The question was brought up about mapping. Is there anybody online tonight that would be interested in starting to mark all these different things that were talked about today? Because there are a lot of historical sites along the way, from the old fields to down in Flat Lick where the trail splits to Cumberland Gap, Thomas Walker's place, the iron furnaces, the last cabin the Daniel Boone stayed in. Those are just a few that I know of that people have talked to me about. So is anybody here that online tonight that can do mapping that would want to start putting that together if we can get them the information?
Well, mapping is going to be an important part of this, but we may have to start with just a list. You know, if we can get a list together of the things that should be identified on the map, that gets us a little further down the road as well. And this list could be broken down by county so that we can zero in on folks that may have the local knowledge to physically identify the location for these items, these assets. And then it's my hope that we can then bring in some folks with the GIS capability section by section to start identifying those cultural assets along the corridor. So it can start with a list. Mapping would be great if we can get that going as well, but the list is going to be important.
Yeah, if everybody can furnish that for their home county, if they have that information, and if your neighbors aren't on this meeting tonight, ask them to submit their list too.
Great, thank you, Judy. Any other questions or thoughts before we close?
Russ, there's a question about where this tonight's PowerPoint PDF is available.
I think we can, if you'd like a copy, shoot an email to Judy. She has a copy of it, yeah, or to myself, either one, and I can send out a PDF of the PowerPoint.
I can probably go ahead and share it on Facebook too, if y'all think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Can you hear me, Russ?
Yes, I can.
Just let me say that when you go out to explore the trail, that's when it becomes kind of almost like a spiritual thing. It's and that's where the joy of the whole thing is trying to find these places. When you finally find it, you get this aha feeling, and when you realize that's where they actually traveled over. When you occasionally you'll hit one where you're pretty sure you're dead on and it's accurate, and you get this kind of creepy feeling. And the spiritualism part, it becomes a spiritual thing, kind of. So I won't have time to do it. I would love to do it, but those that go out and do try it, I think that's what they'll find. It's a real joy, kind of that's what it's all about.
I agree. Thank you very much, John. Anyone else have anything you'd like to share?
Tressa has said she'll check the KHC to see what is already listed on the database and pull the maps.
Okay,
That's
great.
And that the local E911 would be a good way to get those already familiar with GIS mapping involved. That's from
Great.
Jeremy Wells.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great. Again, thank you for everyone's participation and willingness to help with this process. It's a great project, and I can't hardly wait till I have the opportunity to go at it full bore again. I'm at this point as a consultation, I'm limited to how much time I can spend on it. But once this project's approved, which I hope it will be, I'm looking forward to driving and learning this corridor and seeing what's there and trying to see it from the eyes of the first of the Native Americans who utilized it and the first explorers that came into Kentucky. So as John said, it is a spiritual experience. When he took me on a tour, it was really moving to be able to stand in some of those spots, knowing that you were about as close as you can be to what history was in this part of the country. So anybody have any other thoughts? If not, we will close out tonight and give everyone a good evening, and thank you for participating.
Russ, we appreciate you and all you've done to put this together. And I just want to give everybody one last shout out. If you'd like to write us a letter telling us what you're willing to do for this project so you can be listed as a partner in this application, that would be great. We still need some. Joy's been real good. She's submitted a couple. And so we need to get everybody on board that we can to support the project and list what they're going to do in that support letter to help move the project forward. So again, Russ, we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we will close out for this evening. Again, thank you, and we'll see you on March 11th, hopefully in the afternoon.
Thanks.
Did you not call Mom?